Marlo, it's awesome to finally have you on the podcast. And you've come prepared with the equipment and all, new mic. I love it. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I thought we would start with your artistic style. You know, one of the great things that I've seen through your work and got introduced to your work via Proof Collective is that I find it very unique. And I know we can technically say that about every artist out there, but there's really a distinctive feel about your work. It's very light. It's very soothing. It's almost like a depiction of letting go, so to speak. And my question to you is, how did you arrive at this style and how is it evolving over time?
Well, my work was really inspired by my meditation practice and sort of my inner journey. When I was younger, I was like in a much darker place. And in my 20s, after I started meditating, I really was able to let go of a lot. And I started feeling like real happiness for the first time and inspiration. And I really wanted to share that journey with people. So my work is, because it's inspired from within, I think that's what makes it not look so much like other people's work, because I don't use references from outside.
Can you tell us a bit more about your meditation practice?
I've been meditating probably since my mid-20s or so, quite a while now.
And do you go like into these like long meditations, or is it just like small increments every day?
There's some days where I feel like I need more meditation, where I might meditate for 3 hours or something. But most of the time, I would say probably about half an hour in the morning when I first wake up. And I can go to about an hour, and that's pretty standard for me.
I have a very similar practice. I don't go to an hour yet, but I do 20 minutes every morning. It's been very helpful.
Yeah, it's one of those things that once it clicks for you, it's like, it's pretty life-changing, and it's hard to imagine going back to before.
It's interesting how a lot of times we're so busy with our minds and we're constantly running on a treadmill almost, that we make excuses to not have enough time for like a meditation practice. I remember before I got into meditation, I would say, I have no time in a day. Why would I like allocate 20 minutes or 30 minutes of my morning to this? But then as you do it, it just becomes a habit. And actually you're more energized as you start the day. So
yeah, I think you become a more efficient person as you meditate more, and it's like it saves you time in the long run.
So I have come prepared and done my homework as per your Twitter message. So for the audience listening, Marlo DM'd me on Twitter telling me about two of her works. Do you say Bliss 1 or Bliss 001?
It doesn't matter to me. Whatever you want to say is good.
Okay, so two of her works, which is Bliss 1 and Awakening 1. And she told me, instead of thinking when I look at them, instead of doing that, observe my body's reactions to the work and see what I feel for each one. And she was saying that they are very different. And I've done it for about 30 minutes in the morning, right after my meditation. And what I've noticed is that each of them has a distinctive feel, and perhaps like it evokes a different sentiment when you look at them. Mm-hmm. So for the first one, Bliss 001, and you'll tell me if I got this right or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, this is a test for sure.
I see the idea of ascending. You know, I think a lot of times we want to accomplish a lot of things in life and we forget being and enjoying that present moment. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that Bliss 1 really reminds me of that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for interpretation, but I was curious about how each work gave you a different feeling viscerally, and then how you interpret that feeling can be different. So for me, Bliss is very physical. I feel like a lot of energy moving up and down my body when I look at that artwork, and it feels like very kind of rejuvenating and energizing to me. So I think that's similar to in line what you're saying.
I feel like, and this is for both of the works, I feel like I could be looking at them forever. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've noticed with Awakening 1 is that I found myself trying to detect patterns while I was first looking at it. So I would see circles appearing. And then I'd be like, okay, this is the next circle that's going to appear. And then this one, and then this one. And at some point, I just lost the pattern. And it just felt like, okay, I was just observing this for what it was and not trying to like label the artwork, so to speak. So in that sense, it's very good at like getting me into like a meditative state of mind.
Yeah, for that one, it's really about getting out of your head and quieting your mind. And it's interesting because for me, bliss is very like about the body and physical. And awakening is more about the head, but in a strange way, like it really quiets my head and kind of makes my head tingly. It's interesting. It's interesting that you can look at an artwork and it has a physical effect on you.
Mm-hmm. I want to go over one of the tweets that I think it's been a couple of weeks back or a month back that you said this, but you, and this is what the tweet says. It says, I do a behind the scenes video of my creative process, but it's 90% me healing past trauma and meditating. So I have to ask you, since I have you on the podcast, what is your creative process like? And how does that differ across the different mediums you use?
Yeah, that one was kind of a joke, but not a joke. Because there's so many cool videos of people, artists doing behind the scenes stuff. And mine is like going to therapy and crying in a corner or meditating or whatever. And it's like, I don't think anyone wants to see that. But for me, art and life are the same thing. There's not really a distinction between the work that I do externally and internally. So, yeah, my process is really about finding states of consciousness that are worth embodying and worth expressing to people. Because a lot of artists, they express what they're feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my personal preference is to express feelings that are more elevated. And like I said, like I was in such a dark place when I was younger. When I was just expressing my feelings back then, it was just like dark and cynical work. And that just didn't feel right to me. So my process is really mostly getting to a place where I am able to express joyful and positive states. That was my biggest challenge for sure, because it's not I'm not like naturally like a happy, bright, joyful person. So that journey is really the biggest thing for me in what I am making now.
I love that. And I feel like the most addictive form of drug is the emotions we feel. And we'll constantly try to relive those past traumas or those past emotions we're attached to. And it can become very almost like self-fulfilling if you always feed your mind the same type of emotions. So for example, like even me, like I do a bit of drawing as well, and I play electric guitar, but if I'm fueled on anger or perhaps anxiety or just this idea of it's me against the world, it just tapping onto a different type of energy that eventually becomes draining.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the fact that you're taking that different approach, which is like you're actively working on yourself to put out stuff that will bring positivity and light to the world.
Yeah, I feel like what we put out in the world does have an effect on things. Like even the smallest things have some sort of effect, even if it's tiny. So it's really important to me, as much as I can, to really focus on making the world more positive and at least my little corner of it.
And have you felt in your experience that you gradually built up to that? Because I feel like even with the meditation practice, a lot of it has to do with doing it daily and making it a habit. Is it the same thing for your work? How was that transition from going to perhaps a darker place where you were fueled by more negative emotions and getting to this place now where you're more fueled by a lighter aspect?
I think it's both fast and slow. I think we have access to higher states of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, like a flow state or anything like that. We have access to that anytime. So It's like if you were in an accident or something, you can switch on to this like really super intense altered state of consciousness. So it's not necessarily something you have to work 100 years to get to this like higher plane. Like you can really access any state you want really in a short period, but then maintaining it is the part that is slow. Like learning how to maintain lighter, happier states, that's a lot more of a challenge.
When you think about colors and you implement them into your work, do you have a specific science that you follow, or you're just really following your personal intuition and gut?
I think it's both, but it's not like a conscious science. So with any artwork, there's kind of, you could almost say like a scientific formula that's followed. So if you're watching someone paint, you can kind of get that formula into your head and almost know what they're going to do next because there's some sort of logic or formula there, but it's something you're generally tapping into intuitively.
When you create your works, do you think about how it will be received by your community, or are you just like purely expressing? Maybe another way to phrase this is, do you think about the marketing aspect of your artwork, or are you purely following what feels right to you?
I think it's really important as an artist to create in a pure way as much as you can, ignoring any external pressure or opinions. With that said, though, that doesn't mean you have to market the work that you think is too personal or too weird or anything like that. So it's really kind of two separate things. I think you should make the weirdest, most fun and authentic work you can, and then you can kind of use your intuition to decide which stuff should be put out in the world, which stuff should be marketed or minted. But definitely you don't need to market everything you make.
I'm curious because I think a lot of artists out there, even the people listening, sometimes might find themselves trying to live up to like short-term expectations. And perhaps, that can be to sustain themselves financially. How do you approach that?
Yeah, as much as I can, and this is in my first book too, instead of focusing on marketing and appealing to a market, I focus on intention and successfully completing that intention. So if you think about what you want your work to do for people, to benefit people, and then the way you put that work out into the world should align with that. So if you're trying to spread whatever peace and love and happiness and whatever cheesy stuff you want to put out there, then you put it out there in a way that aligns with that rather than trying to sell it. You're just completing your mission of spreading those good feelings. I hated cheesy when I was younger and like all depressed and shit. Like cheesy was like so cringe, so lame and cringe. Like it's funny how when you like let go of a lot of your cynicism and negativity, like the stuff you thought was cheesier is actually the most real and important stuff.
So wait, when you were younger, did you almost like despise this idea of like someone being very meditative and calm and happy?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, like people, if you were happy, you were like a huge asshole and I hated you. And then like one of the first exposures I had to meditation and stuff was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I was like, I hate this guy. This guy is so annoying and he wants me to like feel all my shitty feelings and I don't want to. And I used to listen to that audiobook just to like calm down. And I didn't really do the stuff he said because it annoyed me, but eventually it kind of seeped into my consciousness, I think.
And that's the power of audio, I feel. The more you listen to someone, the more you kind of absorb, almost like a sponge, what they're talking about. And Eckhart Tolle has such a calming voice.
Yeah.
It becomes addictive in some way.
Yeah, I really like that audiobook, and the way he pronounces ego sounds so much like eagle to me, and it just like makes it more entertaining to listen to how much he hates eagles.
One of the concepts I've never fully understood, and maybe you can give me some insight on this, but what do you think he means when he says like pain body?
Yeah, I think the pain body he's talking about is like a stored accumulation of trauma. So a lot of people talk about trauma being stored in the body. And I think he's just saying that same thing, but in a more holistic sense that includes like your energetic body or like your whole being rather than just your physical body.
Is there a specific work you've done, that just surprised you with the response it's gotten?
Good question. I feel like the most surprising thing for me is how much people get what I'm trying to say, because the work is abstract and so simple, but people will tell me their response to it, but it's exactly what I had intended. And so that's been really cool to see because of how intuitive my process is. It's like abstract, and like when I set out to make something, I'm not like, okay, this color does this to your brain and this whatever does this.
Right.
It's just like fully intuitive, and yet it's so successful so far.
A lot of times I feel like when I look at your work, it is simple, but it's also quite complex, and I think that it embodies meditation very well, because a lot of times we try to like understand life rationally, or we try to understand reality rationally, or at least our sense of self rationally, overcomplicated with layers of labeling and just conditioning we've gotten over time. And I feel like your work is kind of stripping away all that and really forcing us to look at what's right in front of us. And so in that sense, I really love what you've been putting out. And I was curious about how you actually put those together. Is there a process of using a certain program? If you can divulge any of that, or like, what does that look like when you create those works?
When I first started digital art, it was in Photoshop because I already knew how to use Photoshop from photography early on. And I just wanted to see what would happen. Like I really approached it in a curious way. And when I have a vision for a work, I just do it. Like I don't think about how to do it or plan how to do it. I just do it. Like I just intuitively know how to do it. So made something in Photoshop, and I was like, well, this could look interesting animated. I think it could really express the intention of the work better. So I looked up how to make a frame animation in Photoshop and then just made it work somehow.
And it's basically, what is it, like 24 frames a second?
I think it's like 30, and there's generally over 200 frames per animation.
In another one of your tweets, you said, it's a good time to see if your current path aligns with your highest values. Do you know what your values are? Ignoring them invites pain and confusion. Living them brings satisfaction, clarity, and inspiration. Can you tell us a bit about your values and what is important to you?
Yeah, I feel like living your life based on some sort of higher value or something outside yourself is kind of like the biggest life hack, because it really changes you on so many levels, and it really brings a lot of inspiration to everything you do. For me, I think choosing a value that's really almost impossible to fully realize is the most inspiring, because you can work towards it forever and not really get tired of doing it. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really about unity consciousness, which I don't see a lot of people talking about, but basically the idea that we're all connected and everything you do has an effect on the whole. I feel like it's really empowering, because you can look at something that you don't like in the world, and all you have to do to help with that particular issue is to look at yourself and change something in yourself to make it a little bit better.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about goals or intentions or things we're working towards. There's two ways of seeing it, because I feel like sometimes people set goals so high that they naturally make excuses never to reach them. But then there's also the people like you where it fuels them. For me, it's, somewhere in the middle, because I know when I get too up there, should I say too much in the clouds, I tend to give myself too much leeway or time frame to achieve that. Do you ever feel like you need to motivate yourself to create, or does that come naturally?
I think that for the really big, impossible goals, it can be helpful to make something abstract, like what I was saying about unity consciousness, like working towards like the oneness of society or civilization is never going to happen in my lifetime, but I can work toward that in any way, big or small. And then I can set smaller goals like complete this painting or complete this animation or share so many new works per month or something like that. So I think it's good to have like an umbrella goal and then attainable small goals within it. And about creation, like for me, everything is creation. Like everything you do is part of your creation that is you and your life. So there's no needing to motivate because it's automatic.
Mm-hmm. And is that something you do, meaning like you set daily goals or weekly goals or monthly goals so that you're keeping yourself accountable and you're staying on track in some way?
Yeah, I try to set as few goals as possible because I like to be more spontaneous and open to new inspiration. So, for sure, I will have some smaller goals, but for the most part, I like to be free form.
Very similar in that way. Like I feel like when I structure my day too much, it just gives me a lot of stress instead of being actually productive. So
Yeah.
I like to just give a general skeleton structure, and then I play within that boundary, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say I'm the same.
Another great quote from you that I love is, rest is not a reward for good work, but a prerequisite. Can you elaborate on that? You seem, as you mentioned before, you were probably someone that was more identified with the negative aspect, the heavy aspect of like, I have to work hard. It has to be hard. It has to be challenging for me to produce good work. But I feel like you've shifted your outlook and your perspective. And now it's almost like it has to come from a place where it's easy and you're rested. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, all of the stuff that I write about and tweet about is like all stuff I really learned the hard way. So I like to share what I can and hopefully influence people in a positive way so they don't have to go as deep into despair.
But sometimes you have to make the mistake to know it's a mistake.
Totally. Yeah. Some people like myself like learning from experience, but yeah, there's like these toxic productivity ideas and mindsets that are so pervasive about how your worth comes from how hard you work or your productivity level. And it's so problematic and destructive to think like that because your worth is really not something that can change. You just are worthy just because you're alive. So when we get into these like capitalist ideals, it can cause you a lot of problems in life. And I don't think it's a good thing to spread around like all these productivity hacks and all these things that are like so self-sacrificial. A lot of that is just the fact that your peak state or your best state is like a state of relaxation and a state of flow. And that's something that you can't stress yourself into or work hard into. It's really something you have to relax into. So if I am not in that relaxed state of flow, then I don't consider the work as valuable. I still consider myself valuable no matter what, but the work itself, I think is more valuable when it's done from a flow state.
But you feel like sometimes you have to push through that. And what I mean by this is, sometimes you're not in the best state possible, but then you start the work and the work induces or is inducting you into like a more peaceful and meditative state.
Yeah, I think there's like a Pavlov's dog response almost that can help you to achieve the states you want by working. But you also need to have like a lot of self-awareness too, because I find that if I'm not in that state easily, there's generally something I'm ignoring that I need to deal with. So that could be like, I forgot to eat today, or it could be like, I'm like out of integrity and I'm trying to like force myself into creating something that's really out of alignment for me. And I could force myself to start and I could make a thing and feel sort of like in a creative state, but then realize after that it's like, it just doesn't feel good. So I think there's a trap there you have to be really aware of. Forcing yourself is often the hard way, and you often end up neglecting other things you needed to do first.
100%. And I feel like that's with any type of relationship, your relationship to yourself, but also your relationship to others, right? Sometimes we think it has to be, hard so that it makes the relationship more valuable in some sense. And I've personally felt that with the work we do. So I own a marketing agency, and I think starting out, you want to get as many clients as possible, and you want to, prove yourself and do a lot of work. But then eventually what you find out is that there's some clients that are just not meant for you.
Yeah.
Have you done some, as an artist, like, do you do some collaborative work with some other brands?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because when I was younger and I was doing photography, I would work for anyone basically. And it was, it was not always good. Like, I really think that the more you can have a high standard for yourself and your relationships, and including your working relationships, it's really a lot more valuable in the end. And that includes financially, because the people who are the wrong clients for you are going to like suck you, like bleed you dry. And it's not good for your business.
And not a good use of your time as well. Because there could be someone else that values what you do 10x that other client and is willing to happily pay you for that and wouldn't like ask you twice about something. But then there's people that, you could do the most awesome work and try to prove yourself, and everything you show to them, they'll be like, no, this is not the way I like it. I want to change that. I want to change this.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems like the more you charge people, the better clients they are. Like when you're charging, like when I used to do like a website or something for $500, like those were the worst clients ever. Like my best clients are the ones that I've charged the most. Like you can charge someone like $10,000 for something and they'll be like, oh yeah, looks great. Thank you so much. And that's it. Like,
yeah, there's actually a meme with that where, I forgot like what it actually says, but it's like two section. And it's like, it says $500 client. I want you to know that I put my wholehearted trust in you, and like, this is going to be very important for us and whatnot. And then the other client's like a $50K client, and it's just like money sent. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's true. Like when you start out, you get so like worried that you have to take these crappy clients to stay afloat. And it's
such a insidious pattern too, because you spend all your time on those, let's say like $500 clients.
Yeah.
And I mean, it always depends on the business model, right?
For sure.
I'm talking generally like as an artist or somebody that does some creative work, you tend to focus on these smaller clients because you think that that's what you're worth. And so it's draining 100% of your time. So you don't have enough mental bandwidth to even look at someone that might, instead of having like 10 clients that pay you 500, you could have one client that pays you 5,000. It would be a lot easier. You're just totally blind to that. It's interesting.
I think it's just a matter of like scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. And when you're in that scarcity mindset, getting clients that also have that mindset and don't want to pay you, it's like just all negative all around. But if you can learn to value yourself, raise your rates, and attract more abundant mindset clients, it's really a life changer.
You know, it's funny because if you would have told me 3, 4, 5 years ago about this kind of stuff, I would have laughed you out of the room and I would be like,
Yeah.
get out of here, like with your attracting, like, you know, the law of attraction and the secret and stuff like that. And now I'm like, yeah, I just think it makes sense. It's just logical. If you're around people that value your work, your circle will become deterministic of what you get.
Yeah, it's about what you put out. Like if you value yourself, that changes your behavior and your wording and everything that you put out. And so logically, that's going to affect who appreciates you and what people think about you. If you show a lot of self-worth and confidence, a lot of people are like vampires. They'll see that and they'll be turned off because they know they can't screw you over or use you the way they want.
Eckhart Tolle was like, that was like your introduction to meditation?
Yeah, I think it was, as far as I can remember.
And then from there, what pushed you to keep listening to that? And, you know, what drove that practice? Was it just that single book, or eventually you got curious and you got more resources?
I just noticed how even just listening to the audiobook helped me to feel better. So I just kind of eased into it slowly, I think. And after I started trying to meditate on my own was when I actually started feeling like real happiness and positive feelings for possibly the first time in my life. Like, what is this? Like this, I didn't think this was going to happen to me ever. Like, I thought I was just like a depressed person and that's how it was going to be. So it was obviously very motivating when you experience that kind of change.
With your relationships, whether it's like loved ones or, you know, even your partner, how have they supported your art, or how have they held you back? And how do you make sure all of it is in unison so that it can help you flower as an artist instead of like holding you back?
Yeah, I've found that when you really grow and change a lot as a person, you can get strong reactions. So some people might be happy for you, but if you're going from like a dark place to a light place, like back in that dark place, the people around you were probably mostly similar to you. So when you start to like value yourself more and value the energy that's around you from people and have higher standards in your life, that can be really off-putting for people. So I'd say it's been mixed, and I've really had to I've had to really prioritize myself and my art in a really strong way and just say like, this is how it is.
Yeah, like draw some boundaries.
Yeah, like it's not like I say like, oh, I'm going to do this. And people are like, oh, let's help you. Let's do all this stuff for you. Like, you just have to do it. You have to do it for yourself.
You're really into, well, recently I saw that you were into beaded painting.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into that, and what sparked this kind of passion?
Well, I was working on regular sort of acrylic paintings on canvas, and I wanted to find a way to express light and like sublime feelings. And I was looking at translucent materials, and I just got on this like crazy this crazy path of experimenting with all different types of translucent mediums. And eventually I thought about using beads because my work, even my digital work, is generally like really bright colors. And then I put a translucent layer on top. I can show you the beads.
Oh, nice.
The screen is so little.
Oh no, that's awesome. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, so I'll generally put color underneath, and then this is like white translucent beads on top. And it just really fit with what I was doing because it's so meditative. You can see on the back, it's like all the little threads. I still have to tuck in all the ends, but each bead is its own stitch.
So then you would put a color behind that?
Yeah, the painting is underneath. I did that first, and then I just put the beads on top one by one.
Wow, that must take a lot of time.
This was about 140 hours of work.
My God. When you work with digital versus physical, do you have to adapt your approach? And do you feel like it's different or no difference at all?
The thing that changes the most is kind of the intensity of the creative flow. Like if I'm doing a big physical painting, it's very like physical and intense. And then if I'm doing the beaded work, it's very slow and more mellow and calm. And then digital is probably in between somewhere.
Are you more of a morning or night owl kind of person when you create?
I would say I'm a morning meditator person. I like to meditate in the morning for sure. And then when I create kind of depends on what I'm doing. If I want to do like really intense, deep work, I will do it right after meditation before looking at any social media or emails or my phone or anything.
Talking about social media and Discord, which we all love and hate. How do you manage all that? Like, do you have quite a community that follows you and a community that is supportive of your work? How do you make sure you're staying creative, you're producing, you're giving some output, but also you're being there and listening to the people that want to reach out to you?
It's a really hard thing to balance. And I find when I first got into NFTs, it was like early 2021 and things were so crazy and intense. I would be on the internet till like 12 or 1 in the morning and then wake up and like immediately go onto Twitter and Discord and like, what's happening today? What are we minting today? I was actually never too much of a degen like that, but it has been nice. The last few months, it's been a bit quieter and it feels like more the core people are left. So it's a lot easier to balance, but you really have to prioritize and make sure that you get creative work done every day. Because as an artist, if you don't do that, you get kind of crazy.
Yeah, and also you lose that momentum, I feel.
Yeah, momentum is really important in a creative practice as well as like as far as like selling your work. A lot of artists can't come back as easily if they just disappear for months on end and then come back and try to pick up where they left off.
That's what I find is almost counterintuitive a lot of times when people think about meditation and productivity. And I consider myself like in that camp too. When I first started, I always thought that, if you were meditating, you were kind of passive. But then I realized that meditation is kind of like the ultimate tool for you to be more productive. Mm-hmm. In a sense, like I felt myself achieving more.
If you're a creative person, I find the more you meditate and get into the right state of being, the more inspired you get. So it's actually really good to meditate. It's really good to journal and be bored and give yourself a lot of space where there's no inputs. Because creative flow is like a flow from inside to outside. And then social media and everything we spend most of our time doing is a flow from outside to inside. So if you're just like absorbing and feeding off of like everything around you all day, that's really not conducive to creative work.
It's like this difference between being reactive and proactive. I find like a lot of people are so reactive to the outside environment, what's happening on social media, what's happening on Discord, like
Yeah.
what's mint in today. And I remember that, like the early 2021 proof days, where like on the server every morning I felt like I had to catch up with everything because I'm like, did I miss something? And when you start your day like that, of course you're already feeling like you're one step behind, and you're already not in a good state of mind to create because you're already reactive.
Yeah, exactly. Creativity is fully about the being proactive and choosing what to put out into the world that's not already in the world. So if all you're doing is reacting and deriving everything you do from what you're seeing, that's not as creative.
A final question that I have for you, Marlo: what are you working on at the moment, and what can the fans, the supporters, the community expect from you in the following months?
Well, I just finished that bead painting, and I'd like to focus more on digital for a little while. So I'll probably do some editions, some more accessible stuff. I also need to do some more one-of-one animations, but I think it'll be some smaller editions for a while. And I'll be starting new bead paintings too.
Very cool. So they can follow you on socials at Marlo Johnson, right?
Yeah. If you just look up marlo.eth, that's kind of the easiest way to find me everywhere. So
Awesome. Well, Marlo, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time, and see you soon.
yeah, thank you. It was nice to talk with you.